The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Captain Marcus Thorne adjusted his ceremonial sword for the 100th time. 23 years of service to the crown had taught him that discipline was everything, but today felt different. Something in the air whispered of change, though he couldn't quite place what it was. The palace buzzed with its usual activity. Servants hurried through corridors carrying silver trays. Nobles discussed politics in hushed tones, and fellow guards maintained their stoic positions at every entrance. Marcus had seen it all before countless times, yet as he walked his regular patrol route through the East Wing, his trained eyes caught something that made him pause. Near the servants' entrance, partially hidden behind a marble pillar, stood a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25, with auburn hair that had clearly seen better days and clothes that, while clean, showed signs of careful mending. What struck Marcus most wasn't her appearance, but the way she held herself. There was something regal about her posture despite her obvious poverty, something that didn't quite fit. The woman's eyes darted nervously around the courtyard, lingering on each guard she spotted. When her gaze finally met Marcus's, he saw something that stopped him cold. It wasn't fear exactly, though that was certainly there. It was desperation mixed with a kind of hope that seemed almost painful to witness. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she simply looked at him with those haunting green eyes, and Marcus felt as though she was trying to tell him something crucial without saying a word. Before he could process what was happening, Lord Chancellor Aldrich appeared at Marcus's elbow. "Captain Thorne, I trust everything is in order for today's ceremony?" Marcus forced himself to look away from the woman. "Of course, your lordship. All security measures are in place." "Excellent. The king expects nothing less than perfection, especially with so many foreign dignitaries attending." Aldrich's cold eyes followed Marcus's previous line of sight. "I see you've noticed our little problem by the servants' entrance." "Problem, my lord?" "That woman has been lurking around the palace for 3 days now. The kitchen staff report she's been asking questions about the royal family. Most inappropriate." Aldrich's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile on a more pleasant face. "See that she's removed from the premises immediately. We can't have vagrants disrupting today's festivities." Marcus nodded stiffly. "I'll handle it personally." As Aldrich swept away, Marcus approached the woman with measured steps. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her delicate features, the way her hands trembled slightly despite her attempts to appear composed. When she saw him coming, she didn't run as he expected. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met his approach with quiet dignity. "Miss, I'm afraid I need to ask you to leave the palace grounds," Marcus said, keeping his voice gentle but official. The woman's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need to see the king. It's about Prince Edmund." Marcus felt his blood chill. Prince Edmund had been missing for over 2 years, presumed dead after a hunting accident in the northern forests. The official story was that wild animals had claimed him, though his body was never found. The king had grieved publicly for months before finally accepting his son's fate. "Prince Edmund is dead, miss. The entire kingdom mourns his loss." "No," she said with quiet certainty that shook Marcus more than any passionate outburst could have. "He's alive. I know because I've been taking care of him." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything Marcus thought he knew. He glanced around quickly, ensuring no other guards were within earshot. "That's impossible. You're mistaken, or I'm not mistaken." Her voice grew stronger, more confident. 2 years ago, I found a man half dead in the forest near my village. He'd been attacked by bandits, beaten so badly his own mother wouldn't have recognized him. He had no memory of who he was, couldn't even remember his own name. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Many men get attacked by bandits. This man had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on his left shoulder. He spoke 3 languages fluently, even with his memory gone, and when he recovered enough to walk, he moved like nobility, like someone who'd been trained in swordplay since childhood. Every detail she mentioned matched what Marcus knew about Prince Edmund. The birthmark was known only to the royal family and their most trusted servants. The prince had indeed been tutored in multiple languages and was considered one of the finest swordsmen in the kingdom. "Even if what you're saying is true," Marcus said carefully, "why come forward now? And why haven't you brought him with you?" The woman's composure finally cracked slightly. "Because he's dying. The injuries to his head, they never properly healed. He's been getting worse for months now, and the village healer says there's nothing more she can do. He needs the court physician's medicines we can't afford. She reached into her worn cloak and withdrew a small object, pressing it into Marcus's gloved hand. He asked me to bring this if anything happened to him. Said it might help people believe. Marcus looked down at the item and felt the world shift beneath his feet. It was a signet ring bearing the royal seal, specifically the prince's personal seal that he'd worn since his 16th birthday. The ring that should have been on Edmund's body if he'd truly died in those woods 2 years ago. Where did you get this? Marcus's voice came out rougher than he intended. He gave it to me last week when the headaches got so bad he couldn't stand. He said if he died I should bring it to someone at the palace who might listen. Her eyes searched his face desperately. You're listening, aren't you? You believe me? Marcus stared at the ring, his mind racing. If this woman was telling the truth, then Prince Edmund was alive but dying in some remote village. If she was lying, she was the most convincing fraud he'd ever encountered, and somehow she'd gotten hold of the prince's personal ring. Neither possibility sat well with him. What's your name? He asked. Elena Hartwell. I'm a seamstress in the village of Millbrook, about 2 days' ride north of here. And the man you've been caring for? What does he call himself? Thomas. That's the only name he could remember, though he was never certain it was truly his. She paused, studying Marcus's face. He dreams sometimes. Calls out about horses and hunts, about someone named Marcus who taught him to fight. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place with devastating clarity. Marcus had indeed trained Prince Edmund in combat, had been like an older brother to the boy who would be king. If this Thomas had memories of those lessons, even buried ones. I need you to stay hidden for a few hours, Marcus said quietly. Can you do that? Hope flared in Elena's eyes. You believe me? I'm going to verify your story. But Elena, if you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate scheme, it's not. I swear on my mother's grave, everything I've told you is true. Marcus tucked the ring safely into his uniform pocket. There's an abandoned tower in the north courtyard. Wait there until sunset. If I can help you, I'll come for you then. As Elena nodded and melted back into the shadows, Marcus realized his life had just taken a turn he could never have anticipated. If she was right, then his duty to the crown and his duty to the prince were about to become very complicated indeed. The rest of the day passed like a fever dream for Marcus. He went through the motions of his duties, overseeing security for the diplomatic reception, checking guard rotations and maintaining his professional demeanor. But inside his mind churned with possibilities and doubts. The prince's ring seemed to burn against his chest where he'd hidden it beneath his uniform. During a brief break, Marcus slipped away to the palace archives. As a captain, he had access to most records, including detailed reports about Prince Edmund's disappearance. He pulled the file he'd helped write 2 years ago, scanning the familiar pages with new eyes. The hunting party had consisted of Prince Edmund, 3 nobles, and a small contingent of guards. They'd been tracking a legendary white stag through the northern forests when a sudden storm separated the group. When the weather cleared, they found signs of a struggle near a cliff face. Blood on the rocks, torn fabric from the prince's cloak, but no body. The search had lasted 3 weeks. Marcus himself had led multiple expeditions following every possible trail. They'd found more evidence, a boot that might have been Edmund's, but the spring rains had washed away most traces. Wild animals were common in those woods, bears and wolves that could easily drag away a wounded man. But now, looking at the map, Marcus realized something he'd missed before. Millbrook, the village Elena mentioned, was only 15 miles from where they'd found the blood. If someone had survived the initial attack, if they'd managed to crawl or stumble through the forest while injured and confused. Finding some light reading, Captain? Marcus spun around to find Lord Chancellor Aldrich standing in the doorway, his pale eyes fixed on the open file. Just reviewing old security protocols, Your Lordship. Ah yes, the prince's unfortunate accident. Such a tragedy. Aldrich stepped closer, his footsteps eerily quiet on the stone floor. I trust you dealt with that vagrant woman as I requested? She's been removed from the premises, Marcus replied, which was technically true. Good. We can't have disruptions, especially not today. The king has been in such fine spirits lately. It would be unfortunate if anything upset his current state of mind. There was something in Aldrich's tone that made Marcus's skin crawl. The Chancellor had always been coldly ambitious, but there seemed to be a deeper warning in his words. Of course, the king's well-being is our primary concern. Indeed it is. Aldrich's thin smile returned. You know, Captain, loyalty is such a precious thing. Those who demonstrate it are rewarded. Those who don't— He left the sentence hanging as he turned to leave. I'll see you at tonight's banquet. Alone again, Marcus felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. If Prince Edmund was truly alive, then his return would change everything. The king had no other heirs. Edmund's younger sister had died of fever 3 years ago. The succession had been a topic of quiet concern among the nobility, with various distant relatives positioning themselves as potential inheritors. But Lord Chancellor Aldrich had been the most vocal about the need for stability. He'd convinced the king to delay naming an heir, arguing that rushing such a decision in grief would be unwise. In the meantime, Aldrich had consolidated more and more power, effectively running the kingdom while the king withdrew into his mourning. If Edmund returned, Aldrich's influence would disappear overnight. The man had too much to lose to let that happen quietly. As the sun began to set, Marcus made his way to the abandoned tower. The old stone structure had once been a guard post, but years of neglect had left it partially crumbling and overgrown with ivy. It was the perfect place for a clandestine meeting. Elena was waiting for him, pacing nervously in the circular room. When she saw him, relief flooded her features. "You came. I wasn't sure you would. I said I'd verify your story." Marcus pulled out the ring, watching her face carefully. "This belongs to Prince Edmund." "There's no question about that, but I need more proof before I can take this any further." "What kind of proof?" "I need to see him myself." "This Thomas you've been caring for? If he's really the prince, I'll know." Elena nodded eagerly. "How soon can we leave?" "He's getting worse every day. This morning he didn't recognize me at first, and the seizures are happening more frequently." The desperation in her voice convinced Marcus more than any evidence could have. This woman genuinely cared about someone who was dying, and she was willing to risk everything to save him. "We can't leave together. Too many people would notice if I suddenly disappeared. But I can arrange for a small patrol to the northern villages. Routine security check." Marcus paused, considering the risks. "Elena, if I'm wrong about this, if you're somehow deceiving me, it won't just be my career that's over. They'll execute you for treason." "I know," she said quietly, "but if I don't try to save him, he'll die anyway. At least this way there's hope." Her courage impressed him. She had nothing to gain from this deception if it was one, and everything to lose. "There's something else you need to know," Marcus said. "Prince Edmund's return wouldn't just be a joyful reunion. There are people in this palace who have built their power on his absence. They won't welcome him back with open arms." "You mean Lord Chancellor Aldrich?" Marcus stared at her in surprise. "How do you know about Aldrich?" "Thomas Edmund!" "He's been having more memories lately. Fragments of conversations, faces, names. He's mentioned that name several times, always with anger." Elena wrapped her cloak tighter around herself. "He doesn't remember much, but he remembers not trusting someone called Aldrich." This revelation sent chills down Marcus's spine. If Edmund had suspicions about the Chancellor before his disappearance, it raised uncomfortable questions about what had really happened in those woods. "Elena, I need you to think carefully. Has Thomas ever mentioned anything about his hunting accident? Any details about what happened?" She frowned, concentrating. "Not much. He has nightmares sometimes about falling, about someone calling his name. But there's one thing," she hesitated. "He has scars on his back, old ones. The village healer said they looked like sword cuts, not animal attacks." Marcus felt the final pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. Sword cuts? 3 parallel lines between his shoulder blades, too precise to be from claws or teeth. The implications were staggering. If Prince Edmund had been deliberately attacked, if his disappearance hadn't been an accident at all, then bringing him back wouldn't just upset the political balance. It would expose a conspiracy that went to the very heart of the kingdom. "We need to be very careful," Marcus said. "If I'm right about what I'm thinking, then we're not just rescuing a lost prince. We're uncovering treason." Elena's eyes widened. "You think someone tried to kill him?" "I think someone succeeded in making everyone believe he was dead. The question is whether they'll try to finish the job when they learn the truth." Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the palace courtyard where torches were being lit for the evening's festivities. Somewhere in those grand halls, Lord Chancellor Aldrich was probably congratulating himself on another day of unchallenged power. The man had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to crumble. "I'll arrange for the patrol to leave tomorrow morning," Marcus decided. But Elena, once we start this, there's no going back. Are you prepared for what might happen? Thomas saved my life once, she said simply. When bandits attacked our village last winter, he fought them off even though he was still recovering from his injuries. He doesn't remember being a prince, but he's still noble in his heart. If there's even a chance we can save him and restore him to his rightful place, I have to try. Marcus nodded, impressed by her loyalty. Then we'll bring him home. But we'll need to be smarter than his enemies if we want him to survive his return. As they made their final plans, neither of them noticed the shadow that detached itself from the wall outside the tower. Lord Chancellor Aldrich's most trusted spy had been watching from the moment Marcus entered the abandoned building. And now he melted back into the darkness to report what he'd overheard. The game was about to become far more dangerous than either Marcus or Elena realized. Dawn broke gray and cold over the palace as Marcus prepared for what might be the most important patrol of his career. He'd carefully selected 2 guards he trusted completely, Lieutenant Hayes and Sergeant Morrison, both men who'd served under him for years and had known Prince Edmund personally. Elena waited at the stables, disguised as a servant girl hired to guide them through the northern villages. She'd bound her hair back and dirtied her face to look more common, but Marcus could still see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted toward every shadow. "You're certain about this route?" Marcus asked her quietly as they prepared the horses. "Thomas described the way to me many times. He remembers fragments of that last hunt, the paths they took through the forest." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He also remembers the sound of horses following them, more than should have been in their original party." This detail made Marcus's blood run cold. The official report had mentioned only the authorized hunting group. If there had been additional riders not accounted for in the investigation. Captain Thorne. The voice made Marcus spin around. Lord Chancellor Aldrich stood at the stable entrance, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. His cold eyes took in the small group, lingering on Elena with obvious suspicion. "Your lordship, you're up early. I could say the same of you. A routine patrol, I'm told. To the northern villages? Standard security sweep. We've had reports of increased bandit activity in the area." Marcus kept his voice level, professional. "How thorough of you. I trust you'll be back by tomorrow evening?" "The king has requested a full security briefing about the diplomatic visitors." "Of course, your lordship." Aldrich stepped closer, and Marcus caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else, something medicinal and unpleasant. "Captain, a word of advice. Sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. Old wounds have a way of festering when disturbed." The warning was clear, but Marcus had come too far to back down now. "I appreciate your counsel, but duty requires thoroughness." "Indeed it does." Aldrich's smile was razor thin. "Safe travels, Captain. I'll be very interested to hear about your findings." As they rode out through the palace gates, Marcus felt eyes watching them from multiple windows. He'd expected some attention, but the level of interest seemed excessive for a routine patrol. Either his suspicions were making him paranoid, or Lord Chancellor Aldrich had good reason to be concerned about what they might discover. The ride to Millbrook took them through increasingly wild country. The main roads gave way to forest paths, and the comfortable civilization of the capital faded into memory. Elena proved to be an excellent guide, leading them along shortcuts that saved precious hours. During a rest stop beside a clear stream, Lieutenant Hayes approached Marcus privately. "Sir, is there something you're not telling us about this mission?" "Morrison and I have been talking, and this doesn't feel like any routine patrol we've been on." Marcus had been dreading this conversation. Hayes was sharp, observant, and completely loyal. He deserved to know what they were walking into. "James, what I'm about to tell you must stay between us until we're certain of the facts." Marcus glanced toward Elena, who was watering the horses with Sergeant Morrison. "We may have found Prince Edmund." Hayes went very still. "Sir?" "The woman guiding us has been caring for a man she believes is the prince, a man with no memory of his past found badly injured in these woods 2 years ago. That's..." Hayes struggled to process the information. "If it's true, if he's really alive, then someone went to great lengths to make us believe he was dead. Someone who had access to the hunting party. Someone who could ensure the search would fail." Hayes's face hardened as the implication sank in. "An inside job? I'm afraid so. And if we're right, then bringing the prince home alive may be more dangerous than leaving him lost." They rode in thoughtful silence after that, each man lost in his own calculations of what they might be facing. By late afternoon, they crested a hill overlooking Millbrook, a small but prosperous-looking village nestled in a valley between two ridges. Elena's demeanor changed as they approached her home. The confident guide was replaced by a nervous young woman, returning to a place where everyone would have questions about her mysterious companions. "Thomas is staying in my cottage at the edge of the village," she explained. "Most people think he's my cousin, recovering from an accident. They don't ask too many questions because—" She hesitated. "Because what?" Marcus prompted. "Because they're afraid of him sometimes. When the headaches come, when he has his episodes, he says things, orders people around like he's used to being obeyed. The blacksmith swears he once heard him speaking in what sounded like court language, discussing matters of state." This behavior pattern fit perfectly with what Marcus knew of Prince Edmund's personality. Even without his memories, the prince's natural authority would shine through. The cottage was small but well-maintained, with a garden that showed Elena's careful attention. Smoke rose from the chimney and Marcus could see a figure moving behind the oiled paper windows. "He doesn't know you're coming," Elena said as they dismounted. "I thought it best not to raise his hopes in case we decided he was an imposter," Marcus finished. "Can you blame me for being careful?" His heart couldn't take another disappointment. Marcus handed his horse's reins to Hayes. "Wait here. I need to see him alone first." Elena nodded and opened the cottage door. "Thomas, I've brought someone to see you." The man who turned from the fireplace made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Even changed by injury and hardship, even gaunt and prematurely aged, the face was unmistakably familiar. Prince Edmund had always been tall and lean, but now he seemed almost skeletal. His dark hair, once perfectly groomed, hung long and unkempt. But the eyes, those distinctive blue eyes that marked the royal bloodline, were exactly as Marcus remembered. "Who are you?" The man's voice was rougher than it had been, scarred by whatever injuries he'd sustained. But the cadence was right, the slight accent that came from the best tutors in the kingdom. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I served your father." The man, Thomas, stared at him with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been recognition. "My father? I don't—" "Elena, who is this man?" "Thomas," Elena said gently, taking his arm. "This is the Marcus you dream about sometimes, the one who taught you to fight." Something shifted in Thomas's expression. He studied Marcus more intently and slowly, like dawn breaking. Awareness began to creep across his features. "Marcus," he said slowly, You used to make me practice sword forms until my arms ached. You said a prince who couldn't defend himself wasn't worthy of defending others." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Those exact phrases had been his teaching philosophy. Words he'd repeated countless times during training sessions with the young prince. "Your Highness," Marcus said, and dropped to one knee. The formality seemed to unlock something in Thomas's damaged memory. His posture straightened, and for a moment, the authority Elena had described flickered across his face. "Get up, Marcus. We're not in the palace," he paused, frowning. "Are we? Sometimes I get confused about where I am." "No, Your Highness. You're in Millbrook Village. You've been here for 2 years. 2 years?" Thomas sat down heavily in a wooden chair. "Elena told me it had been a long time, but 2 years." He looked up at Marcus with eyes full of pain. "What happened to me? Why can't I remember?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Elena before answering. "We believe you were attacked during a hunting expedition. You disappeared and everyone thought you were dead." "Dead." Thomas repeated the word like he was testing its weight. "But I'm not dead. I'm here, His face suddenly contorted with pain and he pressed both hands to his temples. "The headaches, they're getting worse. Elena says I'm dying." "Not if I can help it," Marcus said firmly. "We're going to get you to the royal physicians. They'll know how to treat your injuries." "The palace," Thomas said, and something like fear crossed his features.
"I dream about the palace sometimes."
"Dark dreams about someone who wanted to hurt me." He looked at Marcus intently. "Can I trust you? Really trust you?" "With your life, Your Highness." "Just as I always have." Thomas nodded slowly, then turned to Elena. "And you? Will you come with us? I don't think I can face this without you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Of course. I've come this far." As they began making preparations for the journey back to the capital, Marcus felt a mixture of triumph and dread. They'd found Prince Edmund alive, which was miraculous. But now came the harder part, keeping him that way long enough to reclaim his throne. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were riding toward far more than bad weather. The conspiracy that had tried to kill the prince once wouldn't hesitate to try again, and this time they'd be ready for any attempt at rescue. The real battle was just beginning. The journey back toward the capital proved more treacherous than Marcus had anticipated. Not from the weather, those storm clouds continued to gather overhead, but from the gradual realization that they were being followed. It started as a feeling, the prickle of eyes on the back of his neck during rest stops. Then Hayes reported seeing the same rider on a distant ridge twice in one afternoon. By evening, when they made camp in a sheltered grove, Marcus was certain they had company. Prince Edmund, still calling himself Thomas despite remembering more fragments of his past life, seemed to sense the danger too. His military training buried beneath the amnesia was beginning to resurface along with his memories. "We're being hunted," he said quietly, as they sat around their small campfire. His voice was stronger than it had been that morning, as if returning toward his old life was giving him strength. "I can feel it. How many?" Marcus asked, impressed that the prince's instincts were still sharp despite his injuries. "At least 4 riders, maybe more. They're staying far enough back to avoid being seen directly, but they're definitely tracking us." Edmund winced and rubbed his temples. "The memories are coming back faster now. I remember you teaching me about pursuit tactics, about reading signs of being followed." Elena moved closer to him, her face pale with worry. "Who would be following us? I thought you said we could trust your men." "We can trust my men," Marcus assured her, glancing at Hayes and Morrison, who were checking their weapons with grim efficiency. "But someone else knew about this mission. Someone who doesn't want the prince to reach the palace alive." As if summoned by his words, an arrow whistled out of the darkness and embedded itself in a tree trunk inches from Marcus's head. Everyone dove for cover as more arrows followed, coming from at least 3 different directions. "They've surrounded us," Hayes called out, his sword already in his hand despite the arrows still flying. Marcus crawled toward Edmund and Elena, who had taken shelter behind a fallen log. "Your Highness, can you fight?" Edmund's face was grim but determined. "My body remembers even if my mind doesn't." He picked up a sword from their supplies, testing its weight. Despite his physical weakness, his stance was perfect, the muscle memory of countless training sessions taking over. "Stay close to Elena," Marcus ordered. "Hayes, Morrison, we need to break their circle before they can tighten it." The battle was fierce but brief. Their attackers had expected to catch them sleeping, not ready for a fight. Marcus and his men fought with the skill of trained soldiers, while Edmund, despite his injuries, moved with the deadly grace he'd learned as a prince. Even weakened, he was still formidable. When the last attacker fell, Marcus quickly searched the bodies. What he found confirmed his worst fears. These weren't common bandits or opportunistic criminals. They were professional soldiers, well-equipped and organized, wearing no identifying marks but carrying the kind of weapons only the wealthy could afford. "Assassins," he told Edmund grimly. "Someone paid good money to make sure you never reached home." "Lord Chancellor Aldrich," Edmund said with growing certainty. "His name keeps coming back to me, and every time I remember him I feel angry. Betrayed." Elena bandaged a cut on Edmund's arm where an arrow had grazed him. "What aren't you telling me about this man?" Marcus hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. "Aldrich has been effectively ruling the kingdom since your disappearance. If you return and reclaim your throne, he loses everything. More than that, if you remember what really happened during that hunting trip. He'll be executed for treason," Edmund finished. "That's why he can't let me live." He stood up, swaying slightly but determined. "How far are we from the capital?" "Half a day's hard ride if we push through the night." "Then that's what we do. The longer we stay out here, the more time he has to send additional killers." They rode through the darkness at a punishing pace, stopping only to rest the horses when absolutely necessary. Edmund's condition seemed to improve with each mile closer to home, as if proximity to the palace was helping heal whatever damage had been done to his mind. As dawn broke, they crested the final hill before the capital. The city sprawled before them, with the palace rising majestically at its heart. For Edmund, seeing his childhood home seemed to be the key that finally unlocked his memories completely. "I remember everything now," he said, his voice filled with pain and anger. "The hunting trip, the attack, all of it." "Tell me," Marcus urged. We were tracking that white stag, just as the report said. But we weren't alone in the forest. Aldrich had sent men ahead of us, men who were supposed to be protecting alternative routes. Edmund's hands tightened on his horse's reins. When we were separated by the storm, when I was alone and vulnerable, they attacked. Not bandits, Marcus. Our own people. The sword wounds on your back, Elena said softly. 3 of them tried to kill me. I fought, but they'd planned it well. They beat me, stabbed me, and threw me off that cliff. They must have thought I was dead. His voice grew bitter. Maybe I was supposed to be dead. Maybe surviving was the one thing they didn't plan for. Marcus felt sick thinking about how close the conspiracy had come to succeeding. But you survived, crawled away into the forest. Barely. If Elena hadn't found me. He reached out and took her hand. She saved my life in more ways than one. As they approached the city gates, Marcus realized their problems were far from over. Word of their return would spread quickly, and Aldrich would know within hours that his assassination attempt had failed. The Chancellor would have to act fast and decisively if he wanted to maintain his position. We can't go straight to the palace, Marcus decided. Aldrich will have prepared for that possibility. We need somewhere safe to regroup, somewhere we can get you proper medical attention and plan our next move. What about the Temple of St. Matthias? Elena suggested. Even chancellors can't violate sanctuary rights. Edmund nodded approvingly. The old priest there, Father Benedict, he taught me languages when I was young. If he's still alive, he'll help us. They made their way through the winding city streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where palace guards might spot them. The temple was exactly as Marcus remembered it. Ancient stone walls covered with ivy. Peaceful despite being in the heart of the bustling capital. Father Benedict was indeed still alive, though much older than when Edmund had been his student. When he saw the prince, the old priest's eyes filled with tears. My boy, we thought you were dead. The kingdom mourned your father. He stopped, studying Edmund's gaunt face and Elena's worn clothes. But you're hurt and there's danger following you, isn't there? Yes, Father, and I need your help. Within minutes, they were safely inside the temple's sanctuary, while Father Benedict's trusted assistants took care of the horses and stood watch. The priest examined Edmund's head injuries with surprising medical knowledge. These wounds were deliberately inflicted, he concluded. Someone wanted to damage your mind as well as your body. The fact that you've recovered this much is miraculous. Will he be all right? Elena asked anxiously. With proper care and rest, yes. But he needs medicines I don't have here, and the kind of healing that only time can provide. Edmund sat up straighter. I don't have time, Father. Every moment I delay gives Aldrich more opportunity to consolidate his position. If I'm going to reclaim my throne, it has to be soon. Father Benedict nodded gravely. Then we need to be very careful about how we approach this. Aldrich has spent 2 years convincing everyone that you're dead. Your sudden reappearance will be a shock, but some may question whether you're really who you claim to be. What do you suggest? Marcus asked. The king holds court every morning after prayer. If Edmund appeared then in front of witnesses with proof of his identity, the priest trailed off, considering the possibilities. It's risky, Hayes pointed out. Aldrich will have guards loyal to him in that room. But it's also the most public forum available, Edmund countered. If I'm going to reveal myself, I need witnesses who can't be silenced or bribed. Elena had been quiet during this discussion, but now she spoke up. There's something else to consider. What about the king? Learning his son is alive after 2 years of grief. The shock could kill him. This sobering thought made everyone pause. King William had aged dramatically since losing his son, and his health had been declining. The wrong kind of surprise could indeed be fatal. We need someone he trusts to prepare him, Marcus realized. Someone who can break the news gently before the public revelation. Sir Robert Ashford, Edmund said immediately. He was Father's closest friend, and he never believed I was truly dead. He kept pushing for more searches long after everyone else had given up. Father Benedict smiled. Sir Robert comes to morning prayers every day. He's a devout man, and he's never stopped mourning you. If anyone would recognize you and believe your story, it would be him. They spent the rest of the morning planning their approach. Sir Robert would be told privately, then asked to prepare the king. Meanwhile, Marcus would use his position as captain to arrange for loyal guards to be on duty during the court session. As afternoon approached, Edmund's condition began to deteriorate again. The stress and physical exertion of the journey were taking their toll, and the headaches were returning with vengeance. Maybe we should wait, Elena said, holding a cold clo. Dawn came too quickly, and with it the weight of what they were about to attempt. Edmund had slept poorly, his head injuries making rest difficult, but his determination remained unshaken. Elena had stayed by his side through the night, helping him through the worst of his episodes. "Are you certain you're strong enough for this?" she asked as he struggled to stand without swaying. "I have to be. This may be our only chance." Edmund accepted her steadying hand gratefully. "Besides, I have something Aldrich doesn't expect." "What's that?" "You. He planned for me to return alone, if at all. He doesn't know about the witness who saved my life, who can testify to finding me half dead in the forest." Marcus had left before sunrise to position loyal guards throughout the palace and ensure that Sir Robert had successfully prepared the king. When he returned to the temple, his expression was grim. "There's good news and bad news," he announced. "The good news is that Sir Robert spoke to the king and His Majesty is prepared for your return. In fact, he's eager to see you, though we've convinced him to wait for the formal court session for the sake of witnesses." "And the bad news?" Edmund asked. "Aldrich knows something is happening. He's called for additional guards to be present at court today, claiming he has concerns about security. He's also been meeting privately with several nobles since dawn." Father Benedict looked troubled. "He's positioning his supporters. Worse than that," Marcus continued. "He's been spreading rumors that foreign agents might attempt to plant an imposter prince to destabilize the realm. He's laying groundwork to discredit you before you even appear." Elena felt her heart sink. "So even if you prove who you are, some people will still doubt." "Then we'll have to make the proof overwhelming," Edmund decided. "Not just my identity, but the truth about what happened during that hunting trip." They made their way to the palace through back streets. Elena disguised once again as a servant, while Edmund wore a hooded cloak that concealed his features. The familiar walls of his childhood home seemed to give him strength, and his step became steadier as they approached. The throne room was packed when they arrived. Word had somehow spread that something significant was going to happen at court, and nobles, courtiers, and officials filled every available space. At the front of the room, King William sat on his throne, looking older and frailer than Edmund remembered, but with eyes that sparkled with barely contained anticipation. Lord Chancellor Aldrich stood at the king's right hand, his face a mask of calm concern. But Marcus noticed how the man's knuckles were white where he gripped his ceremonial staff, and how his eyes kept scanning the crowd as if looking for threats. "Your Majesty," Aldrich was saying in his smooth voice, "before we begin regular court business, I feel it necessary to warn everyone present that we have received troubling intelligence. Foreign powers may attempt to deceive us with false claims and impersonators. I urge everyone to be skeptical of any dramatic revelations today." The crowd murmured with interest and concern. Aldrich was indeed clever, Marcus had to admit. By warning against deception, he was making it harder for people to believe the truth when it was revealed. King William, however, looked irritated with his chancellor. "Lord Aldrich, I think we can trust our own judgment. Now, Sir Robert tells me there is someone here who wishes to address the court." This was their cue. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the large chamber. "Your Majesty, I present someone who has been lost but now is found. Someone who was thought dead but lives still." He gestured toward the side door where Edmund waited. The prince threw back his hood and stepped into the light streaming through the great windows. A collective gasp rose from the assembled crowd. King William half rose from his throne, his face transforming with joy and disbelief. "Edmund, my son?" "Hello, father." Edmund's voice was rough with emotion as he walked toward the throne. "I've come home." The resemblance was unmistakable despite Edmund's changed appearance. The crowd began to buzz with excitement, but Aldrich quickly stepped forward. "Your Majesty, please," he said urgently. "This is exactly what I warned about. Anyone could claim to be the prince. Look at this man, he's clearly been living rough. Probably coached by enemies of the realm." "I know my own son," the king said firmly, but Edmund raised his hand. "Lord Chancellor Aldrich raises valid concerns," Edmund said, and Marcus heard the steel in his voice that marked him as royal born. "Let me prove my identity beyond any doubt." He began recounting details that only the real prince could know. Childhood memories, private conversations, family secrets. With each revelation, the crowd grew more convinced, and the king's joy became more evident. But Edmund saved his most devastating proof for last. "Father, Do you remember the night I broke into the wine cellar when I was 12? The king's face broke into the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him in years. You told me you were conducting important research into the kingdom's assets, and you laughed so hard you nearly choked, then made me learn winemaking from Master Guillaume for a month. My boy, the king whispered, tears streaming down his face. My son, you're truly alive. The court erupted in celebration, but Aldrich wasn't finished. Touching stories, but still not conclusive proof. This man could have learned these details from servants, from you, Lord Chancellor. Edmund's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Since you were the one who tried to have me killed. Silence fell like a stone. Aldrich's face went very pale, but he maintained his composure. That's a serious accusation, yours, sir. Do you have any proof of this wild claim? I have my memories, which have finally returned completely. I remember being separated from the hunting party during that storm. I remember your men finding me alone and vulnerable. I remember them attacking me with swords, not the wild animals mentioned in the official reports. Edmund pulled off his shirt, revealing the 3 parallel scars across his back. Sword cuts, my lords and ladies. Precise, deliberate wounds meant to kill. The crowd gasped at this physical evidence, but Aldrich rallied quickly. Wounds that could have been inflicted by anyone at any time. This proves nothing except that this impostor has been tortured by his handlers to make his story more convincing. Then let me offer additional proof, a new voice said from the back of the room. All eyes turned to see Elena step forward. No longer disguised as a servant, but wearing the simple dress of a village woman. She carried a bundle in her arms. I am Elena Hartwell of Millbrook Village. 2 years ago, I found this man dying in the forest. He had been beaten and stabbed and left for dead. I nursed him back to health, though his memories were lost to his injuries. She unwrapped the bundle, revealing blood-stained clothing. These are the garments he wore when I found him. Fine cloth, expertly tailored, with the royal seal embroidered inside the collar. Marcus took the clothes and displayed them to the crowd. The workmanship was clearly that of the royal tailors, and the seal was genuine. But Elena wasn't finished. More than that, my lords, I can tell you that this man, even with no memory of his past, still carried himself like nobility. He spoke multiple languages in his delirium, commanded respect without trying, and when bandits attacked our village, he fought to defend us with skills no common man could possess. Her simple, honest testimony was perhaps more convincing than all of Edmund's proofs combined. Here was a woman with nothing to gain from deception, speaking with obvious sincerity about the man she'd saved. Aldrich was beginning to look desperate. Your Majesty, surely you can see this is an elaborate conspiracy. These people have been carefully coached. Enough. King William's voice rang with authority he hadn't shown in years. I know, my son, and I know the truth when I hear it. Edmund, my boy, come to me. As father and son embraced, the court burst into genuine celebration, but Marcus kept his eyes on Aldrich, watching for any sign of what the desperate man might do next. The Chancellor's face had gone through several expressions, from disbelief to rage to calculation. Now it settled into something cold and determined that made Marcus's blood run cold. Your Majesty, Aldrich said in a voice that carried despite the noise, if this truly is Prince Edmund returned from the dead, then I am of course overjoyed. But I must point out that his miraculous survival raises serious questions about the original investigation. Perhaps we should look more closely at who might have benefited from his disappearance. It was a masterful deflection, Marcus realized. Unable to discredit Edmund's return, Aldrich was already positioning himself as the loyal chancellor who would help investigate the conspiracy, rather than its architect, but Edmund wasn't going to let him escape so easily. You're absolutely right, Lord Chancellor. We should indeed investigate who benefited from my disappearance, who gained power in my absence, who convinced my father to delay naming an heir, who had access to the hunting party's route and could arrange for additional men to be in those woods. The implications hung in the air like sword points. Aldrich's face was a mask, but Marcus could see the calculation behind his eyes. The man was trapped, but he was far too dangerous to simply surrender. I think, Aldrich said quietly, that this investigation will reveal some very interesting truths indeed. Marcus felt a chill of foreboding. The look in Aldrich's eyes wasn't defeat. It was the expression of a man. The celebration of Prince Edmund's return lasted well into the evening, but Marcus never let his guard down. He positioned trusted men throughout the palace and kept close watch on Lord Chancellor Aldrich. who had maintained his composure throughout the day's revelations with unsettling calm. Elena had been given quarters near the prince's chambers, officially as a guest of honor who had saved the royal heir's life. She found herself overwhelmed by the luxury after 2 years of simple village life. But more than that, she was troubled by the undercurrents of tension that seemed to flow beneath the palace's celebration. "You're worried about something," Edmund observed when she brought him evening tea as he recovered from the day's exertions. His headaches had returned with the stress, but his mind remained sharp. "Lord Chancellor Aldrich," she said simply. "He accepted defeat too easily. Men who orchestrate murders don't usually give up when their first plan fails." Edmund nodded grimly. "Marcus thinks the same thing. We have guards posted, but Aldrich has had 2 years to place his own people throughout the palace. We may not know who we can trust." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus appeared in the doorway. His expression was grave. "Your Highness, we have a problem. King William has collapsed." Edmund was on his feet instantly, swaying only slightly. "Where is he? What happened?" "He's in his chambers. The court physician is with him now, but—" Marcus hesitated. The symptoms appeared suddenly after his evening meal. "The physician suspects poison." Elena felt her blood turn to ice. "Aldrich? We can't prove it yet, but the timing is suspicious. If His Majesty dies now, with questions raised about the succession and your own legitimacy still being debated by some nobles." Marcus didn't need to finish the thought. Edmund was already moving toward the door. "I need to see him. Your Highness, that might not be wise. If this is an assassination attempt, you could be the next target. He's my father, Marcus. I won't hide while he's dying." The king's chambers were in chaos when they arrived. Court physicians worked frantically while nobles and officials crowded the outer rooms, whispering among themselves. Through it all, Lord Chancellor Aldrich moved like a concerned administrator, organizing the response and issuing calming statements about the king's condition. "How convenient that the prince returns just as the king falls ill," Marcus heard one nobleman mutter to another. Almost as if someone planned the timing, the seeds of doubt that Aldrich had planted earlier were already growing. If King William died now, some would inevitably suspect that Edmund's return was part of a larger conspiracy to seize the throne. Edmund pushed through the crowd to his father's bedside, Elena close behind him. The king looked terribly frail, his skin gray and his breathing labored. But when he saw his son, his eyes focused with effort. "Edmund," he whispered, "my boy, you must be careful. There are enemies close by. Closer than you think. Don't try to speak, father. Save your strength." "No." King William gripped Edmund's hand with surprising force. "Listen to me, Aldrich. He's been preparing for this day. Documents. Sealed orders. If I die before naming you officially as heir—" The king's voice faded, but his meaning was clear. Aldrich had been laying legal groundwork to contest Edmund's succession, probably with the backing of distant relatives who had legitimate but weaker claims to the throne. "Where are these documents?" Edmund asked urgently, but his father had lost consciousness again. Dr. Pemberton, the court physician, approached them with a grave expression. "Your Highness, I must tell you honestly. His Majesty has been poisoned with something I've never encountered before. It's slow-acting but thorough. Without knowing the specific substance—" "How long does he have?" Elena asked gently. "Hours, perhaps a day at most." Edmund closed his eyes, fighting both grief and the tactical implications of his father's condition. When he opened them again, Marcus saw the prince had been replaced by a potential king. "Marcus, I need you to secure the throne room and all royal documents. Elena, can you help Dr. Pemberton? You've had experience with healing herbs and treatments that court physicians might not know." "Of course," she said immediately. "And send word to Sir Robert and any other nobles we trust completely. If father dies tonight, Aldrich will move quickly to challenge my succession. We need to be ready." As they began implementing Edmund's orders, Lord Chancellor Aldrich appeared in the doorway. His face showed appropriate concern, but Marcus noticed how his eyes took in every detail of their preparations. "Your Highness," Aldrich said smoothly, "in light of His Majesty's condition, I've taken the liberty of sending for the other potential heirs. Cousins Henry and Margaret should arrive by tomorrow. The kingdom needs stability during this difficult time." Edmund's jaw tightened. Henry and Margaret were indeed relatives with claims to the throne, but they were also known to be ambitious and easily manipulated. "If they arrived while the succession was still in question, that won't be necessary, Lord Chancellor. I am the rightful heir. Of course, Your Highness. But after your long absence and unfortunate circumstances, some formalities may be required. The Council of Lords will want to verify everything properly. It was a polite way of saying that Aldrich had enough allies to force a formal succession dispute, which could tie up Edmund's claim for weeks or months while the kingdom fell into chaos. I see, Edmund said quietly. And I suppose you've already convened this council. They're gathering as we speak out of concern for the realm's welfare. Elena had been listening to this exchange while helping Dr. Pemberton examine the king's symptoms. Something about Aldrich's confident tone triggered a memory and she stepped forward. Lord Chancellor, she said in her simple, direct way, you seem very well prepared for this crisis, almost as if you expected it. Aldrich's cold eyes fixed on her. I beg your pardon, Miss Hartwell. Elena Hartwell. The woman who saved your prince's life after your assassins failed to kill him. The accusation hung in the air like a sword. Marcus tensed, ready for violence, but Aldrich merely smiled. Such a vivid imagination. Perhaps the stress of court life is too much for a simple village girl. Perhaps, Elena agreed. But I'm not too simple to notice that you've been remarkably calm about the prince's return. Most people would be shocked, overjoyed, full of questions. You've acted like someone who knew he was alive all along. Edmund looked at Elena with new respect. She'd seen what trained courtiers had missed. More than that, Elena continued, warming to her theme. You had assassins ready to kill us on the road back to the capital. That kind of planning takes time. You've been preparing for the prince's possible return, haven't you? You always knew you hadn't killed him successfully. Aldrich's composure finally cracked slightly. These are serious accusations from someone with no proof. Actually, Dr. Pemberton spoke up unexpectedly, I may have some proof. Everyone turned to the elderly physician who held up a small vial of liquid. I found this hidden in Lord Chancellor Aldrich's rooms when I went to fetch additional medical supplies. It contains the same rare poison that's killing His Majesty. The room went dead silent. Aldrich stared at the vial as if it were a serpent. That's impossible. Someone must have planted it there. Who? Marcus asked, his hand moving to his sword hilt. Who else would have access to your private chambers? Who else would know exactly which poison to use and when to administer it? Aldrich looked around the room, seeing hostility in every face. His careful plans were crumbling and everyone could see the desperation growing in his eyes. You're all making a terrible mistake, he said, backing toward the door. The Council of Lords will hear about this. They'll never accept a prince who returns under such suspicious circumstances, who brings chaos and accusations. The only chaos here comes from you. Edmund said firmly. Guards, arrest Lord Chancellor Aldrich for treason, attempted murder, and conspiracy against the crown. But Aldrich wasn't finished yet. As the guards moved toward him, he drew a hidden dagger and lunged not toward Edmund or Marcus, but toward the unconscious king. If I can't rule through manipulation, then I'll rule through succession law, he shouted. Elena didn't think, she just moved. The village girl who had saved a prince's life threw herself between the blade and the dying king. The dagger meant for King William's heart instead caught her in the shoulder, sending her stumbling backward. Marcus's sword took Aldrich through the heart before the traitor could strike again. The would-be usurper fell to the floor, his schemes dying with him. Elena sat against the wall, pressing her hand to her bleeding shoulder but smiling through the pain. Is the king safe? Thanks to you, Edmund said, kneeling beside her. Again. Dr. Pemberton quickly bandaged her wound while examining the king, who had awakened during the commotion. The excitement seems to have stimulated His Majesty's system, combined with the treatments we've been giving him. I think he may survive this. King William's voice was weak but clear. My son, are you unhurt? I'm fine, Father, and Lord Chancellor Aldrich will never threaten this kingdom again. Good. The king managed to smile. Then let's make your succession official, shall we? I've delayed too long already. 3 days later, Prince Edmund was formally crowned as heir apparent in a ceremony that celebrated both his miraculous return and the bravery of the village woman who had saved not one, but two.